All right, so tonight I really want to talk about metaphysics. I probably don't even believe in the definition of the word. I mean, we can talk about definitions to get to but just talking about unusual events, what you do with them. You know, can you do anything with them? Can you make any sense of the unusual? And even things that potentially don't have too much, definitely want to talk about dreams and how that works with hallucination, because I can dream with my eyes open, so you can have visual images kind of projecting, out into space. They're in your head, but we all can relate, because y'all can think of a red car. Y'all picture a red car, and if you do that, just do it right now. Just picture a red car. Okay, like right now, that red car is like right about here in my periphery. Sometimes when I'm visioning things, they're kind of outside, like when you're thinking about things, because you got so much visual stimulus right in front of you that you'll be like, okay, like let's say a White House. Okay, I'm thinking about a White House, maybe up in this corner. And I'll even have dreams where I'm just like, okay, that dream is like over here, so we'll see if that even makes sense. But, and I want to I actually want to make it more about the physics. Taking something that, a topic that people might want to derive more meaning from. But then it just gets swept under the rug as a meaningless, it's like you don't need to look any farther. But I want to stick here where it's like, no, let's take a look at how you dream. If you have rapid eye movement, well, your eyeballs kind of going all over, so you can have things visual, there's potentially, your eyeball can be looking in different coordinates. Anyway, definitely want to talk about the unusual metaphysics. Wearing my, so this is Montana River Guides. I don't drink alcohol. I think that is just about the worst poison you could ever put in your body. I mean, yeah. I mean, convince me otherwise. I guess it's a social thing, but it's social from my perspective. It's social. I don't think there's any other drug, alcohol we're talking, that isn't a peer pressure substance. Like a drag you down, let's drag all our friends down and go drinking. I just don't see it. Like even smoking cigarettes is a DIY, do it yourself. But when it comes to alcohol, the second you're drinking alone, you probably got a bigger problem. But it usually involves, bringing the whole town out on a Friday, Saturday night. Anyway, so we'll see if we talk about alcohol, and we can talk about rafting. Those are kind of the topics of the night. So I just, and this is a perfect format. I'm really excited, just maybe talking in front of the camera a couple hours at a time. Total diary format. I'm probably not even going to watch this anytime soon, but if I have a couple hours, I will definitely go back and watch myself and try to put in video descriptions of okay, here's where I was talking about a bipolar episode, so I was talking about a rafting concept, and then just so I can have a quicker frame of reference if I ever use these videos to make shorter videos. Just kind of interesting. So I was watching, so I just wanted to make sure the footage came out, and I was telling the rescue story of being rescued from Baltimore, calling my dad, and then I was like, all the lights get brighter. And it's very interesting, but right when that part of the film comes up, kind of the lights do get brighter. So I'm just, I mean, that would be like a metaphysics thing. Like, what came first? The lights actually did kind of get a little brighter in the room, and then my mood adjusted to that, and I just happened to be talking about, you know, potentially a positive thing, and then so I made reference to it. So I would, the topic is like, I would dream as a kid, and we have kind of hot water heaters, and they'd always like go thunk, you know, like make the big old clanging noises. But in my mind, I think something was waking me up at a particular hour of the night, and whenever I knew something was going to wake me up, I would have a correlating dream at the same time, and that dream would correlate so well that, like, maybe when the loud sound happened, that would be an intense moment in the dream. So let's say, just from the physics perspective, my brain for sure knows the exact timing of that dream. A loud sound's going to go off, and then so about, even for 10 seconds, let's say it's even just 10 seconds, the dream is going to shift into a scenario where, like, yeah, something's going to happen right at that moment. And then so from the physics standpoint, I do believe that the clock in our head is wired so tight that you could have that precision, especially being in the same house night after night for, you know, for whatever many years. But it seems like, because I always thought it's like, well, it seems like I'm psychic by about 2 seconds. So that would be kind of the meta, is just like, well, like, how, let's say you do have a loud sound, and that's an intense part of the dream, and like right then I get like shot. So how did my, like the meta part would be like, how did the brain create a whole scenario around getting shot right at that moment, and how would it know that the sound was going to come? So from the physics standpoint, I don't believe there's anything meta involved. I think the brain is just hardwired like a clock. So if you actually did I would want to do a sleep study where you'd have potentially completely random noises or stimuli, and see what your dream was up to that point. So you'd have a stimuli, maybe go 5 seconds, and then wake the person up, and then kind of see what that dream was from that perspective. But that's a good place to start. I mean, if you're gonna search for the unusual or the spiritual experience, or what we might put into the meta side of things, shoot, an unconscious person dreaming is a good place to start to see if you could be 2 second psychic. Kind of as a joke, I always feel like, yeah, I'm always 2 seconds. I always feel like, yeah, I could be like 2 second psychic. But then this happens quite often. Whenever I'm kind of at like a dinner party or like hanging out with a friend. I mean, these are times where you're going to have the same conversations, right, potentially. But even if the conversations are a little bit different, every time I leave, like, you know, seeing a close friend, having a conversation, and then leaving, I always feel like I already had that conversation. The joke is like, well, that's probably the short-term memory from marijuana, because yes, you just had that conversation 10 minutes ago. But there is this deja vu where you're just like, no, I feel like I knew I was going to have that conversation. And again, yes, you just had that conversation 10 minutes ago. But it does bring up the topic, especially for mental illness, like just your sense of how you interpreted something can feel like a delusion, you know, or it can be like you kind of know. I kind of have the baseline is life is pretty boring, and then so anything kind of out of the ordinary, like that deja vu type feeling, you know, I kind of pay attention, and you know, I just always keep mental notes of the times that I have that. Because even in life, so if you're comparing dreams to life, and then if dreams, you're like, if you're on the side of the coin, it's like, yeah, dreams are just meaningless, or maybe you don't have them, and they're not that. But like, my dreams are very vivid, full color. You know, it's like a. Ooh, I forget the first name of the director. Last name's Nolan. Anyway, like the Inception movies. Yeah, it's like my dreams are like just as good as his movies, the theatrics in his movies. Like that's to the point where, yeah, I'd, you know, if there's a place I could sign, I would trade. Well, one, yes, I would trade waking life for dream life. You know, if there was dream studies to the point where they needed 5 years of dreaming, like sign me up, I'd be the first one. But I would trade reality for dream. In this instance, I would trade every river that I've ever done, because, like I said from the previous video, like, rivers are intense. Like, I don't know, every time you're out there, I mean, it's like once you're done, it's like a backpack trip. You're like, yeah, that was really fun. I want to go back and do some more. But, I mean, they can be intimidating, especially if you're going big waves, pushing limits and stuff. Ain't no fairy tale. But, and it's not just that when I dream about rivers that they're easier. I mean, they're less consequence because, like, it's hard for the body to know that, yeah, you're now out of the boat, or that's a big wave, but you get through. So there's that aspect. But just from the unique, I don't know. So I would trade every river that I've done just to experience the rivers that I've dreamt about. And I wish science was up to speed where you could actually put wiring in the brain where you could actually see thoughts or see the visual, whatever you're visualizing, if you could see that. And then also, like, dreaming's the same thing. It's just a visual on, you know, a canvas in your mind, you know, full color. If you could see that, I would be very intrigued of just spending my time watching that. Yeah, than running rivers for real. That's how intrigued I am with dreams. It's just really fascinating. Good segue, because like, so for definitions, solipsism is the idea that I'm the only mind and everyone else is just a character in my reality. And I must be making that up because, like, my mind is like the kind of the one mind. Like, that's solipsism. It's very arguable and just probably ridiculous for most anyone. But I bring it up because it's a very useful concept for me having mental illness. Well, it's a topic you're going to have to bring up if you're manic, maybe if you're on drugs, but if you're, you know, schizophrenia, bipolar, mania, you're gonna feel like that. You're gonna feel like you're the only mind and everyone else must be part of your dream world. The other one that comes up is the Truman Show, where you're like, I've had that as like my parents. are just manipulating everything. I would come home, like even coming home from that river trip, so that was like the last time I was in the hospital, 17 days, Middle Fork, lost every night of sleep. My friends brought me back to the house, and that's when I kind of ran to the police station, naked, got to the hospital, finally got help. But that evening, when I got dropped off at the house, my parents had changed the mat in front, like the doormat in front, like, so the entry mat, just a big old kind of rug mat, was changed. And that was enough to be like, this is not the house. That was too much for my brain. I mean, obviously I was in the worst kind of schizophrenia state, mania state I've ever been in. But just like what's too much, like the straw that breaks the camel's back, like that was it. I was like, can't trust my parents anymore. And then, my parents were tired, but then you really, when you're in manic states, you have you might be focusing too much. Like I had mentioned, like the glitches in the Matrix. Just like my parents are a little bit older, so I could, it seemed like they were frailer, and it was only like 10:30, so I just couldn't figure it out. So it just really made it feel like they were not my parents, and that was something I had to deal with. Lost track, but I'll just go back to just the glitches. That was like just that was too much for my mind to take. Guess that was a topic of reality, like when things seem like a dream world. Yeah, I was even just I was at my brother's, as kind of and that might get back because he's has some interesting ideas. He's a physicist. And yeah, we were talking about, just like, how do you know even waking life is not a dream? Like, because one of the ways in high school, me and my friends, we watched the movie Waking Life. It's a really good one. You should see it. It's kind of like the see one, do one with my thoughts that I'm presenting here, kind of in this video diary. It's kind of like a poetic hodgepodge of ideas, kind of all centered around one theme being dreaming, and also kind of like dreaming, meaning of life, existentialism. 19 minutes. In Waking Life, one of the core concepts of the movie was lucid dreaming. If you've never lucid dreamed before, there is never too old to start or try. The idea is that, anytime that you are dreaming, you can recognize that you're dreaming while you're dreaming, and then even in your dreams say, yes, I'm dreaming. And that's such a huge implication, because now you can, one, just observe your dream and potentially remember a little bit more, or you can interact with your dream. And that goes back to the solipsism, because, well, I don't know. We'll leave that aside for a second. But yeah, so lucid dreaming, you can do whatever you want in your dream. You know, it's like waking life, kind of pick the, you know, like the first 3 things that you would do. You would, you know, see if you could, all right, we'll get to that first, but like what you want to do to try to lucid dream is, well, while you're dreaming, you have to say, hey, am I dreaming? So you have to get to that point. How do you get to that point? In waking life, just in your normal day, you'd be like, well, am I dreaming? And if you want a quick tip, this is not in the movie, the answer is always yes. So you have to be careful with this if you're like in real life and be like at the edge of a cliff and be like, am I dreaming? And just say yes. And then like jump. Obviously that's, you have to have some limits. But in your waking life, you should always be like, am I dreaming? And then just say yes. The answer is always yes. And then, you know, start to do something. Do, you know, flip on a light switch. Try things out. What's going to happen is that in a dream you can become lucid, but, I mean, dreams are so, you're so paralyzed physically and mentally in dreams that it's even just hard to observe. And then, so even if you are lucid for a few seconds, you'll go back to not being lucid. And, you know, you'll have to keep reminding yourself that you're dreaming. The other thing that happens is if you get too lucid, and I'll just wake up. You know what I mean? Like if you're like, so I've developed a craft where I get lucid enough just to observe. I'm just fascinated with observing, and I just go for time. It's like, boom, I realized I'm dreaming, and now I'm just going to start to tabulate and remember kind of the dream that I had and see how long. And, you know, 30 seconds, the most a minute, but I mean, sometimes it's, you know, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, or less. Because if you're really trying to interact with the dream, it could be like just 5 seconds and over. So, and I don't know, it's all over 18, but obviously in the movie they're just like, I mean, the top 3 were flip on a light switch, see if it activates the lights. If it doesn't, you're dreaming. You know what I mean? The second one, I've actually done this, was look at your alarm clock or look at your clock next to your bed and see if you can, the numbers work out. And if not, then you're dreaming. Or try to read any sort of print. It's going to be really distorted. So then you're dreaming, and then kind of in the movie, what do? Well, shoot, go have sex. You know what I mean? So that's at your leisure. But that will wake you up real fast. So I try to just observe. It's very fascinating. But anyway. If you've never tried to lucid dream, it's a bucket list. It's a bucket list to get good at, too. I don't know. It's like, I guess, I don't know. Some people just don't dream, don't remember their dreams. If you wake up in the morning and then go back to sleep, that's the REM sleep that you get there should be, that's the best for me to remember dreams. That's usually really good. So just keep that in mind. Saturday morning, Sunday morning, sleeping in. That might be the best time to try to lucid dream, to remember dreams. But I bring up solipsism because dreams are so fascinating that dreams are solipsism by definition. Like, when you're dreaming, I can be dreaming about my parents, my friends, and they'll look, you know, let's say identical, or completely, you know, unique people, actors, actresses, or just, you know, like I say, completely unique and different people, never met them ever, and I've already associated a full personality to them. Like if I'm talking to Brad Pitt, he's talking as Brad Pitt. He is saying things that Brad Pitt would say. You know, so I'm the subconscious is crazy. Even though it's a physical concept, I get it. But it blows my mind that I have seen enough of like Brad Pitt movies to be like, if I'm talking to Brad Pitt in a movie, in my dream, like, he's Brad Pitt. He's gonna say things like Brad Pitt. Like, even when I'm doing this camera stuff, I'm still just talking like myself. Like, I can imagine how other people, you know, like an Edward Norton would, you know, like talk and stuff like that, be kind of intense, you know, like that. I get it, you know, I think we all know our boss might be intense or something like that. So that aspect of knowing who we are and knowing that we are pretty consistent, but then also knowing who these other people in the world are, to that when they enter their mind, they are their own identity enough where if we're dreaming about characters, like, they're coming up with brand new sentences and brand new, you know, like, with the same character. So it's just fascinating to me. Oh, and then, like, that's, I don't know why I related to solipsism. I'll have to think about that one, but that's the opposite of solipsism. Like, I'm not controlling. No, it is solipsism because, like I said, it's like Brad Pitt ain't in my dream. You know what I mean? Like, I am imagining that person. I'm fully creating. So solipsism, in my mind, I'm creating that dream reality with all the characters in it. But the fact that they are so true to human nature, and so different and so not me, it can shift the definition of solipsism, of what we potentially just interpret solipsism as, just a laughable concept that, oh, like, you know, it's like my parents, my brothers, they're just part of my reality. Like, I'm just envisioning them. But even then, if you let go of the laughable side of solipsism, that I am, like, creating them out of thin air or whatever, there is the concept that, you know, and this is just all just from my interpretation of things and just my observations. But one of the aspects is I really look at humans as just kind of, you know, like one, kind of like broken robots. That's kind of an unfriendly way to say it. But not broken, but just poorly created AI. You know what I mean? Like, oh, maybe you don't know what I mean, but if you're like driving down the highway, there's just so many predictable scenarios. So that's one aspect that I like to do, is like just observe. Like, oh, like if you're angry, like driving because someone cut you off, try to act and then try to just do the opposite. Oh, so how about this? Somebody like cuts you off, so you're going to tailgate them. So you can do two things. You can tailgate them. You can do the normal thing. You can like tailgate them and then also be like angry at them. Raw. You know what I mean? But do one less thing. Like, how about tailgate them, but then not be angry at them, actually be really happy, or I don't know. But do something other than being angry. Be that kind of scientist and then just see what they do. You know what I mean? And then, like, so that's one aspect that I find interesting, or that's one aspect that you can show that humans are very basic AI biological creatures. Just kind of their programming is very basic. You put a slight input of cutting someone off, you're gonna get a reaction. Or if someone cuts me off and then I get a little bit closer, then they already programmed in to know that I must be like not cool with that, like getting cut off like that. So then you kind of have a little tuffle. Not that you should try that, because that could be dangerous, but that's the easiest way to show programming of a human brain at its just primal. You know what I mean? Like, you cut me off. And then you go into program mode of get a little closer, but then do something different just to observe. Yeah. And I do like to talk about driving because it is a very interesting topic, because people do just, I don't know, just at their most basic, it's really difficult to, when you do get angry, to like calm yourself down. One tip that I give myself and I can give other people, I call it popcorn. You know, anytime that someone is like driving recklessly or maybe cuts you off, and then I can just be cool with it and then take a step back, I just do this, like, and just throw a couple pieces of popcorn in my mouth, and as a pretend, because maybe they might get into some cool accident and, you know, like drive up on a fire hydrant. I don't know, they might kill someone, you know, that might be not cool, but I don't know, so I just do popcorn, because you just never know what the hell life's going to throw, and obviously you're not going to make the situation worse by like backing off. It's just life. You're going to watch, you know, at some point, some crazy accident. But people can drive pretty viciously and dangerously and come out just fine. So, but I always do the popcorn just because that's life. What else are you going to do? I'm not going to get mad at. I mean, if you had to get mad at all the crazy aggressive drivers out there, that'd be a lot of drivers to get mad at. So, popcorn. But yeah, human, simple, programmed. Yeah, so that's kind of like solves it. If you go to a dinner party and you have all the same conversations that you're going to bring to the table, then the dinner party is probably going to be very similar in your mind to, you know, it's like nothing's going to be out of the ordinary, because humans are kind of all programmed, you know, kind of one way or whatever. The other aspect of that is the kind of the meta side of things. There's always, you know, I did enough religious study, you know, raised Catholic, when I started having, even before having diagnosed bipolar, I was out in Seattle, went to a Unitarian church, kind of celebrated all religions. So always fascinated with kind of the spiritual nature. The church that I went out to in Seattle was a Unitarian, or Church of Unity, so prayer. That church got established by a couple in Kansas that just prayed by saying they were healed, kind of that affirmative prayer, like, you are healed. And, you know, they even got that from, they're very Christian, you know, so their aspect of what Jesus, in the Bible, Jesus was like, well, just get up and walk. You know, so that was what they kind of wanted to bring to themselves, but they had, they would pray, you know, let's say 4 or 6 hours a day just over make sure their bodies were healed because they had ailments. And I don't know, just one of those stories, they didn't have ailments anymore, so blah, blah, I don't know. It's just one of those things that science ain't up to speed on proving any of that stuff. So, I mean, yeah, that's where it gets kind of frustrated. But frustrating, just that, like, I don't know, just even from the scientific physics standpoint, it's just like, yeah, it's like, I don't know, life can seem pretty uncool when you can't even prove the crap that you want to work don't work. And then so what do you do? You know what I mean? Like, I'd say don't put a lot of stock into stuff that might not work. I don't know. Or yeah, it's like, that's just, go do other fun things that do work. I don't know. Go down a river. That works. I mean, it doesn't have any end goal, but I'm just saying, I don't know if I'd waste too many more Sundays when you can just ponder these concepts at any old time. But anyway. So yeah, that was a Unitarian church. But Christianity. So one of the aspects of kind of like the stories of Jesus is he had like an aura around him. The second like you're in that aura, like you're already more in, so when I was going to Seattle on the Unitarian side, like that was the concept I kind of, stuck. I wanted to kind of believe that, yeah, like as a human, you can have kind of a bigger grasp. I mean, even that's a physical concept. I mean, even just look at YouTube. Like your reach is farther than you think it is, even in a very scientific, analytical perspective. And then you just kind of have, I don't know, but from that meta side, well, that also shows the solipsism. Like there just the other day, like this kind of cranky looking guy got out of his car, and then like I drove by, I wasn't like blowing him over. I was giving him some room, but you get out and kind of look to see if you're gonna get run over. But man, he just had the crankiest look on his face, and I remember just looking at him. Definitely not with a smile. I gave him kind of the same cranky look back. And so that same aura kind of goes both ways. It's like that cranky old guy probably don't see a lot of smiling faces in his life because he's a mirror of, every time he looks with that face at people, people ain't smiling or laughing, that's for sure. You're just like, oh no, that guy is cranky. So just know that as like I don't know, just as an AI biomass of a human, is that you don't want to set your programming to just stupid, I don't know, it's like, so there is that. I mean, people, yeah, change your perspective, change your life, that's for sure. But I just find it interesting concepts that probably are more into physics, but kind of touch on topics that people don't think, have any analytical basis. Alright, so some of you can relate to seeing dots. As a kid, I would see the dots, when I at nighttime especially, I would wake up from a dream, but then I would still see the dots, and the dots would be part of my dream. So if I was dreaming about movies I saw, let's say I was really little, I was seeing Bambi. I remember Bambi, like E.T., so kind of from a young age. And then you would see, like a cartoon shapes of dots, kind of floating through the air, and then so they could definitely move. And there was no depth to them. They were either like right there and, small, and then they could, get as big as they wanted. They could travel all over. So it's very, I mean, for me, this sounds very important to make the correlation between thoughts in your head and how you visualize them, especially while dreaming. And, I would just assume that what I was experiencing is a byproduct of still dreaming while you're awake. And I would imagine only very few people can do that. And when I was younger, I would, especially since I enjoyed dreaming so much, kind of like sleeping in on Saturdays as a young kid, and dreaming, that when I would wake up, I would just stare at the ceiling, kind of a white ceiling, and just stare and space out, and I would start dreaming on the ceiling. So whatever I was dreaming would just be a full movie projector right on the ceiling. And I imagine some people are like, I don't believe that. But that should be total physics. That's just scientific. It should be easy for other people to do that. I I don't think there's anything limiting anyone from dreaming while their eyes are open. On the middle fork, when I had 6 nights no sleep, that was the last episode I had. That was when I was most schizophrenic. That last night, I said, you know, I was just in an effort. You know, I didn't know how to get to sleep, so that night is no point, might as well. And then I was already to the stage where might as well just start kind of playing around and experimenting. And then, so yeah, so I had, I'll get to the one visual hallucination, but I was just staring at the cliff walls, and it was cartoon shapes, and it was kind of like cartoon. It's kind of interesting to mention Bambi was like cartoon deer and stuff like that. And it was just glowing, just so interesting how you're just staring, and then you're just dreaming, and then, and that's not a very scary hallucination. I guarantee I know that's just a dream. It's not like shadows on a wall that I see something, or like I see into my camera 2 lights and I'm, you know, seeing something physical but then making an interpretation of what I'm seeing around it. This is just straight dream. But it is eyes open, fully visual, high def, color, especially when it's like cartoon. That was very interesting. I mean, I guess I could do that if I just kind of spaced out enough. I was very into those Magic Eye books. We would get them, and all that requires you to do is just look like past the picture. So instead of just look at the picture, you just kind of space out and then just look past it, which is exactly what you're kind of doing while you're dreaming. Well, especially if you're going to imagine something. If you're going to, like, because I'm very good at visualizing. Like, even all the rapids that I've kind of memorized or know, like, I just see them, you know. It's like when you see a red car, so, like, you see the rapid and you see kind of all its stages. And it might not be perfect, but I visualize enough that I kind of have enough snapshots of all these rapids where I can kind of see them. But to do that, you know, it's better just to space out, kind of zone. You don't want to be focused on the colors around you and then try to visualize a rapid. That's kind of harder to do. So like the Magic Eye, if you just kind of space out all the way to the horizon, especially look at your peripheries where you really can't see a whole lot, then you can kind of visualize a lot harder while your eyes are open. So very, very analytical way of looking at, I don't know, even some of these hallucinations. Because one of the visual hallucinations I had that evening on the Middle Fork was I would just look up at the stars, and I was zoning out at the stars so much that they began to move across the sky. So they would just, and then I got them to go in a full, just kind of like rotate, like they were just keep on rotating. And that was classically a very kind of psychotic delusion, hallucination, or just hallucination. Anytime that I have a hallucination while in a mania, I always want to try to have the same hallucination while not in a mania. And 2 evenings before, at the other camp, I asked a tree to show me its light. I spent the entire evening kind of watching the sun go down over the ridgeline and kind of the light backing the trees and just realizing that the trees absorb light. And by the time the sun was kind of done shining, I looked upriver at a couple trees. I was talking to them and I said, "Can you show me your light?" And they flashed kind of a bright green color, and that part is true, But then I think I might have asked even the tree to, can you do that again? And then it did it again. That aspect, I don't know. And even just doing that, like, I think I saw like a little flash of light. But this was like looking at it and then it like flashed, and I was like, I kind of didn't want that to happen. From the scientific perspective, you can be in a, like obviously no sleep, kind of in a drug state. I mean, might as well be on LSD at that point, or it's going to be similar. So a person on LSD, if they ask a tree to like, show them some light, and it flashes a bright light at them, then that's I equivocate the two. It's just like, yes, it happened, but it's one that's probably ain't going to happen during your normal waking, just reality, or just when you're not on drugs or manic or schizophrenic. But that was a tough one to deal with, because then you don't know what reality is. The second, like, you have that glitch in the matrix and you believe that, like, you just lose all touch of reality. Well, it's just like, well, I don't think that could ever happen, and it just did happen. So my brain doesn't know. I mean, it's just like, even if you're just, you're to try to lucid dream, you ask yourself, am I dreaming? And you say, yes, you are dreaming. But in that situation, you don't want to be. You want the world to be rational and normal, and it's not. On that trip, I had a hard time even figuring out if I was dead or not. And I open it up for any, good ways for me to test, like, if I'm alive or not. I mean, in a normal way. It's like, if I ask myself, when I say I don't even know if I'm dead or alive, what is the lucid test? Just like when you say, am I dreaming? And the answer is always yes. It's like when I say, am I alive? I want the answer to also, concretely be yes. And I don't know if I can get that when I'm in those states. Like, I have no idea if I'm dead or alive. Just because that's how warped reality gets. And I'm a drug-free person. Besides smoking a touch of pot in college, like, no drugs, no alcohol, no pharmaceuticals. So this is just kind of what the natural brain wants to do. And luckily I don't get in these states only if I lose a ton of sleep. And yeah, I've got another 11 hours of sleep under my belt. So in the last three days from that last video of showing kind of what a sleepless hypomania state would be, gotten 11 to 12 hours the last 3 nights, and then even between one of those was a 3-hour nap. So well slept. Haven't had any caffeine in a few days. I will be drinking caffeine just as a, I don't know, I've kind of introduced that back in for other reasons, don't want to go into, but, or just digestion, I don't know, just trying to be more regular. Stress, mental illness is stressful, so I'm trying to just get my digestion to be a little faster. It's kind of getting backed up, so TMI, but that's why I'm going to drink some coffee. But that is a risk. Drink coffee, going to be more hypomanic, or just like, I don't need any more energy. I do appreciate when I do get tired. But what I've realized is that, yeah, 1 cup of coffee, the next 2 days I can actually come down. Everyone mentioned that if you're in a state of hypomania or mania, you're always going to hit rock bottom, and I've never done that. I'm going to be a broken record, but maybe it's due to my diet. I'm very curious about whether my diet's better at treating depression than other diets. Just food for thought. I mean, don't want to make any bold statements there, but that's my interpretation. But yeah, caffeine though can bring me down that next couple days. So that's what and I've never had a hard time going to sleep on caffeine. I mean, I'm up for a while, but then I'm okay with, I've actually used caffeine and gotten to sleep at a normal hour. Because it kicks in that energy kind of throughout the day at a higher level, and then you can kind of get to sleep. So it's a very interesting drug that I'm using. And I don't know, it might make sense. Like, if you're already way up, anyone, like, brain balancing drugs are kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, caffeine is probably not going to be a brain balancer because it throws you into one direction, but I know that brain balancing drugs all help both directions. So, like ashwagandha is a natural herb that you can make into a tea or take supplements, but that is one that if you're too high, it can bring you back down. Too low, it can bring you back up. So I find that interesting, that balance can come from both directions. Not that it has anything to do with caffeine, especially because it just kicks you one way, but I don't know. But it does have that opposite effect. I've felt that I kind of come down off of it. Yeah, so this last dream that I had is very interesting. So like when I'm closing my eyes and I'm focusing on colors, like right before I go to bed, I use like a headlamp to read, and sometimes using a red one. So when I turn that off, everything just turns purple, like when I close my eyes, or blue. And I also try to just focus on different colors too, just to see if I can imagine colors while closing my eyes. I find that fascinating. Last dream that I had, I got lucid and it was all dark. I got lucid because the dream that I was having, everything was a little bit too dark. And I was just like, oh, well, and I said, it's kind of interesting how in your dreams things are dark, and that triggered me, oh, dreaming. So then, yeah, I usually just like fly. Like that's if I can like levitate, get off the ground, get bird's eye views, that's the coolest thing to do. But right then I was just like, well, it's really dark, and oh, so here's the correlation. Bear with me tonight on this one. You know, maybe my thoughts on these topics will get stronger, but it's still just very difficult to kind of come to concrete thoughts. But when you close your eyes, if you see, like for me, I see a snow of like red, green, blue. It just makes sense that like you have colors in your imagination that you know. I mean, red, green, blue, that's like the foundation of a TV or whatever. So it just seems that your mind has the foundational colors in it. And then so you can just, even when you think of a white house or a red car, like you're foundationally putting those together, you know, just like Photoshop layers. Like that's what I'm fascinated with. So in this dream, I kind of tested that concept. I was like, oh. And I really didn't know I went from being lucid and then not, because I didn't think I was dreaming. I just thought my eyes were closed. And then so I was like, well, let's test something. I have all this snow. I was like, show me total darkness. And then so my vision went right to the horizon and kind of split all the kind of the snow and those dots, like the red and green, blue and white dots, and there was like this eclipse of black, and then it just grew. That was kind of a scary aspect because like I was just kind of going towards this really like darkness, and but it was very exceptionally dark. So I was like, scientific test check. I was able to, in my dream, go get rid of all the snow and visualize something that was completely dark. and it was very scary because I got kind of thrown into the darkness, and then I was just going really fast, like a spaceship through the universe or something, kind of like you're going into the universe. There's no stars, like you're going to a place in the universe that is total dark, even though you can go to a cave and get total darkness. But you'll still see that snow. So I got rid of all the snow. I thought that was very visually interesting. That only happened for a few seconds, and then the next few seconds, like in the dream, my eyelids were opening, and it was putting in a little bit of a light down here. It's very fascinating because I was dreaming the whole time. So when I woke up, I was a little disappointed because I just can't do that. I can't visualize. I can't do the same thing of taking my mind and that. I mean, I would have to be dreaming during the day to a degree to actually split all of that snow and all those dots and actually see something that's totally solid, totally colored. So I find it interesting that it just seems like this is the, when you close your eyes, that's like the empty canvas, and then your thoughts, see, but when you close your eyes, you're still seeing snow kind of in a general way. So the fact that you're seeing something can maybe help you visualize. It seems connected. Alright, let's get right to it. The multiverse. So my brother lives in Bozeman. He's works with lasers with a company. He graduated from MIT, PhD in physics, quantum physics. He worked on particle accelerators. They're called interferometers. I think that's true. He worked on an interferometer. They're particle accelerators. Anyway, so you can kind of just bare bones. You know, I kind of ask him. I mean, I can probably get these questions off Google. It's just fascinating to ask him to get. You know, so light acts as a wave in a particle. Well, pretty much. I think he was saying like most things act like all waves act like how does he put this? Yeah. Oh, so yeah, all particles act like oh man. I don't want to say anything that's not true. So, but anyway. Seems like everything just acts as waves and particles, both. So it's like there's yep. But from the anyway, so multiverse. I was just surprised that he made a statement. It's just like, yeah, the more that I've been researching quantum physics, the more it makes sense that maybe a multiverse exists. And I was just like, oh, very interesting. I was kind of blown away because it just seemed like a bold thing to say, but then he's also very analytical and scientific minded, so I was just like very curious. So let's say I don't care one way or the other, because I kind of don't. To actually maintain like equilibrium with my mental health, I just really can't care. I try not to care about a whole lot of stuff. You know, it's like kind of frank. You know, that's why I like to talk about topics like death, just from a statistics standpoint, kind of a funny standpoint, we're all gonna die standpoint. I don't know. But yeah, same with metaphysics, spirituality. I'm very fascinated what other people believe, and hopefully I'm not too quick to discount. I'm just kind of interested. Interested why? Like if I was an alien from another planet, I would be very interested in what everyone believed, because wait, you guys all believe different things? Oh, that's crazy. Or like, that's interesting. I don't know. Like, it's just interesting. And if you were an alien that also had a spaceship, it would be, I mean, a time machine. It would be very interesting to see what people believe at the different points and why. I mean, we still, it's very close to Christmas, around Christmas time, so obviously 2,000 years ago is still going strong. And, I mean, does that even make sense? I mean, does writing something down, I mean, I wrote this story in 24 hours, and it's so intriguing. That was the whole point. It was intriguing. I have, like, my first manic episode, and I was going to write something, and my dad read it, and he was just like, this is like, well, everyone's got to read this. So, like, and then to that point, my dad didn't have, psychosis at all, but like I said, my psychosis rubbed off on him, and then while I'm in the hospital, he's reading this, and he's literally experiencing kind of the same reality that I am. Luckily, that was kind of short-lived, and he didn't have an episode until 15 years later, just this last year, and kind of had when he had his mom, like my grandma, passed, and then his brother, my uncle, just passed, and kind of everything came to a front. He was starting to believe a few delusional stories of, just reputation in the community, blah, blah, blah. It kind of just hit a head, and he had his first episode. And so that was very challenging, and he's okay with me talking about that. And yeah, but I mean, so I thought this was biblical. I even wrote stuff, like, right on the cover it said, because that summer, May 21st, 2008, the eve of the birthday, I guess that would be like my birthday eve, like you would give a shit. Don't forget, or you should, I say, remember all your camping gear, because, oh yeah, it's a camp out. So after I wrote this book, I wrote a little notebook, and then that was going to get passed around, blah, 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 blah. There was going to be a big old camp experience at this gulch, and I don't know, we probably witnessed something, very second coming Jesus. I mean, this is what happens when you have a life of Christianity, like, and then you have a mental illness, and then your mind's trying to process all that. That's why I'm so analytical, just because, I mean, show me something. Show me something that's spiritual, that's provable, and you'll get $11 million. So I mean, that's kind of the litmus test. But I'm to the point where I don't discount it, because I'm just still intrigued. I thought it was very intriguing that during that piece of that footage, the light got brighter. But even like right now, I just noticed that when I said the light got brighter, I moved back, and then my face is kind of glowing on this light. I feel it more. So even just like maybe when I was talking about, not being super excited or aggressive stuff, my head was back towards the light. And then when I was talking about something that's exciting, my head's in the light. So I would not have that perspective had I not done a lot of research. Credit to the Atheist Experience. If that pops up onto your YouTube page, definitely watch some videos. I mean, if you are Christian, it shouldn't. You should be Christian enough that you're not going to get turned atheist. But I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, that's. But for me, very open-minded. I just kind of wanted to see all the different perspectives. And that's the one that's helped me a lot. Yeah, and then, so it just shows that, like, I don't know, like the Bible is no less weird than this. I mean, this was supposed to be kind of like in, I'm surprised, I mean, this starts off as kind of just a not much of a story, just talking about like my surroundings. but then I go talk about kind of the relationship falling apart, me and my fiance and my family really not liking that relationship, and then so it's very interesting. Yeah, your kind of life being torn apart with mental illness and relationships, and yeah, that's, you know, stuff that you've built on for, you know, for 4, 5, 6 years. But then also kind of talking about, yeah, I guess I thought this was biblical, you know, just like an analogy of life or something, but I don't know, it's got the witches and it's got all the hallucinatory elements that I was going through in it, so it's probably nothing like that. But yeah, anyway. So, I'm just stating that if you're an alien and you come to the time right now, this is the time we live in. You still have people that are really intrigued about the Bible, you know, and it makes no sense to me, but it makes sense to, you know, kind of a majority of people in the United States, maybe. I don't know if it's a majority. But worldwide, no, you got other religions, you know. I don't know if Christianity is even a third of the world population, but still, that's substantial. Just kind of these beliefs that people believe in is fascinating to me. So then when my brother makes a statement saying, yeah, quantum physics looks like the so that multiverse is kind of makes sense to him. So a broad brush comment could be, what is. I mean, that's kind of my foundation. I get that I can only rationalize so much, I can only know so much, but like, whatever is. I am fascinated on the aspect of, well, can you make it up? Can you guess? Is this an analogy for anything? Is the Bible an analogy for anything? You know, it's like, I do not believe in magical man did anything. But it's no different than anyone striving to understand a concept. I mean, magical man in the Bible would be no different than me trying to see the difference between the line between meta and physics, you know, and it's a worthwhile pursuit, you know, but I think there's a lot of stuff that's just plain made up. So, and I don't know. And then I don't know where people fall, but I guess even me, I'm trying to get to a point where I want to be open to ideas, because even from a scientific perspective, it doesn't make sense just to be so analytical to discount something that you might be able to extrapolate. Like, for instance, let's say the Bible, especially the beginning, might be a guess on how, like, the creation of the universe, even though it says like 7 days and stuff, but let's say you get like one thing right. Like, I don't want to put too much stock into that, could just be coincidental, but I am interested in getting there by guessing. You know, it's like, because when my brother said, so here was the deal. My brother said, yeah, everything I've looked into with quantum physics, I guess the multiverse seems like a very plausible thing. Like, that's kind of what I'm getting at. And then I said, okay, if that's true, and this multiverse is, you know, let's just take that as kind of fact right now, then I said, even the simplest person should be able to add a concept, you know, to the understanding of a multiverse. And in a way, it's like a scientist knows how a wave forms, but like, does Kelly Slater need to know like all these scientific aspects of waves and water. No, he just knows how to shred his body and his board down waves. You know, like that's kind of the difference between, you know, really analytical science of looking at like the foundation of something, and then somebody putting it into action and actually using that concept. I mean, from the multiverse perspective, I mean, how would you experience another universe, or, you know, separate universes anyway? So from that aspect, your best bet would just be writing, you know, books on the concept of multiverse. But that evening, and I was on coffee, and I wanted to add something to it. So if I added something to it, I came up with, you know, just something that would be interesting and maybe make your mind think for a little bit. And he was intrigued when I came up with the concept of there is nothing that there is just one of. He thought that was very interesting, because there's a lot of YouTube videos on zero's not a number, or like, but I was like, even just the number 1 that we think is such a simple number is very peculiar, because even from the children's books, 1 is like you take a chicken and then you put a circle around it and you say, that's 1 chicken. Or like anything you circle, that's going to be 1. But then he was fascinated most by the concept of when I asked, well, name something that there is just 1 of. And I don't know, I asked that to you. Name something that there's just 1 of. I know that some people will go, well, there's just 1 universe. Well, the whole idea was we were talking about the multiverse, so I just thought it was interesting. A lot of theologists would like to believe that there's just 1 God, or just like one, you know what I mean, like oneness, or blah blah blah, you know what I mean? So from us, and then from like I know the atheists will use this concept that kind of bridges into science, is just like theologists would be like, something can't come from nothing. Well, most of the atheists, especially on the atheist experience, they will say, well, it's like, well, no one's saying something is coming from nothing. Nothing might be the most irrational thing, you know, it might have no bearing on the universe. All we know is something, so yes, potentially, yeah, so nothing can be an absurd concept. It's like a 0. It might be a placeholder in our mind for something that we think is a concept. So then I looked at the number 1, and I was very intrigued of how the number 1 also by definition is, I mentioned like if Henry Ford, when he was starting his production line, he made 15 cars. Well, the definition of 1 car is the total number of cars that he made divided by the total number of cars he made. So take those 2 numbers, whatever the 2 totals are, divide them by each other, and then you have this concept 1. 1 is the total number of all things divided by all things. And my brother wasn't too intrigued into this concept, but it brings up, the only place where this argument kind of breaks down is if you think that there can be an infinite number of cars. And that's where I was kind of going on, because the multiverse kind of, it's like all possible outcomes, you know, potentially universes with all possible outcomes. So it kind of brings that concept of infinity into perspective. So definition of 1 is also an infinite number of things divided by potentially an infinite number of things that's also 1. My brother didn't really like that aspect of that argument too much, and I agree that bringing infinity into it, you're already bringing something that's kind of an abstract unknown, and really infinity divided infinity is not 1 either, per se. But then, so this last go around, I kind of wanted to come up with, so from that aspect, he was very interested in like, well, name something that there's just one of. At the dinner party, a relative said, well, there's just one you. I didn't like that one because it's just like, well, I mean, that's like saying, oh, there's just my computer, there's just one of those. You know, it's just like everybody's got a computer, everybody's got a cell phone, everybody's got, you know what I mean? Plenty of people, there's not just one person. I mean, that's kind of like a solipsism thing to say, oh, there's just one of you. Well, that only makes sense if you are the only one and the only mind, and then we're all just kind of part of your imagination. That would be one. Yeah, if there's one mind and solipsism was kind of true, then that would be one. Okay, I really want to jump on. But no, I think the concept of infinity divided by infinity is a very important concept of what I was getting at for the multiverse. Because it's really difficult for us to envision infinity. Yes, we get that. But it's also really difficult for us to envision the reality that we live in. So if the reality that we live in is closer to an infinity, then yes, then it makes it difficult to understand. So the multiverse is that infinity. Like the second you say there's, you know, it's more like a multiverse where all possible outcomes can happen. You can have universes with all possible kind of dimensionals or dimensions, or just concepts of like gravity can be different, and all scenarios kind of worked out. Then you get into this idea of infinity, and so, So then that's what I was so my take home was one was more absurd than the number infinity. Like infinity was more of a constant, one was an absurdity. Like one was the anomaly. Even though the whole idea of coming up with that concept was just like maybe a good YouTube title, like one is an absurd number. That's kind of what I was getting at. But it can apply in the standpoint that, let's say you do have a universe that's not finite. I mean, but that could be a mental leap, because everything that we kind of see in our universe is kind of finite. You know, Henry Ford only made a certain number of cars, so under that definition, the certain number of cars divided by that many cars is one. So if you do have a limited, and then, you know, even within our observable universe, the number of atoms is knowable. Like, it's not even that big of a number. So one atom is the number of atoms that we can see in our knowable universe divided by the number of atoms that we see in our knowable universe. And that's going to be the concept of one. You know, the total number of things divided by itself, you get down to one basic unit. And I'm curious of how quantum physics works with the number one, because, you know, from my very limited, I'm not even using quantum physics as a jumping point to explain anything, but just quantum physics in general, from my general understanding, is, you know, just that you have quanta, you know, the fact that you have basic units is very intriguing to me. Yeah, so it's going to be a mental leap to even think of a infinite universe, but maybe not so much, because if things point to a multiverse, then you can just make that mental leap and then reassess. So if you have a multiverse, then what's the concept of everything being a one unit? So if you have something that's infinity, can you call that infinite set one? Like, where can you call that one? Can you take something that's infinite and divide it by itself to be like, that's one? So I think that can be useful under my definition of the number one being the total number of things in the set divided by the set. So if you have multiverses and you have the set go on for infinity, well, to say that that whole set is one, to rationalize that, you would have to take that entire set and then divide it by itself, so you could get down to one unit in that set. So I was more impressed with that using that definition, even though it still could be an analogy, it's definitely a mental exercise to think of something in infinity dividing infinity by infinity. But I came up with another mental exercise, or not even an exercise, just kind of a cool example. So a coin, how many sides does a coin have? It's kind of like, oh, a coin has 2 sides. But then, like, analytically, a coin has thickness, so that ring around the coin could be the 3rd side. Okay, so a coin could have 3 sides. So then what's an object with 2 sides? Well, instead of a coin, you take a flat surface and then you make a hemisphere. So like a snow globe has 2 sides. You have the flat base, kind of like the coin had the flat base. But instead of 3 sides to the coin, you just have a hemisphere making 2 sides. Okay, I'm going to pause here and say a square has 6 sides, and then you could make a more sided, you could have a 7-sided object, 8, 9, 10. You keep going, and you could make an object that's like a sphere, you get closer to a sphere. So a sphere could be an infinite-sided object making a sphere. Okay? So you have 6 sides for a square, 7 gets more circular, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You could go on to infinity, and then you'd have an infinite-sided object, and it was creating a sphere. So a sphere could be an object with infinite sides. So now I'm going to show how a sphere could be an object with 1 side. So you take that snow globe, it's a base with a hemisphere, so that's a 2-sided object. Well, can we make this 2-sided object into a 1-sided object? And we make a sphere. So a sphere can be both a 1-sided object and an infinite-sided object. Now, no hairs are standing up on my arm. It's just, I thought that was a nice analogy to show that 1 can be represented as infinity. That makes more sense to me for the concept of what a multiverse would be, or what our actual reality is. Kind of that juxtaposition, that like the where you could have an infinite something that's still part of like just a 1 something. But all this is just by induction. So that's kind of gets back to the point, is like, can you just guess? Can you just use your simple-mindedness just to get there by guessing? And I think that's an important, because that's how you're going to hold water, like with the multiverse. Like, if, I mean, honestly, if quantum physics gets us to the idea that a multiverse, they can actually put some definitions on what that might mean, then we can actually make some good movies on that concept, and it'll actually, the fascinating thing about sci-fi is there might be too many branches to go, that are intriguing, where if science can kind of lead us down a path where then you can start creating ideas from that concept, kind of like the Kelly Slater, well, I'm going to surf this wave. Like, if you're going to tell me the multiverse exists, great, let's experiment with that. I mean, that's why, the coolest thing, from my perspective, I thought the coolest thing that Christianity brought was those Left Behind books. That was very fascinating. I remember my 2nd episode, I was still wrapped up in kind of it was the 1st episode. I was, I was so wrapped up to that concept of like the rapture, because when I was hallucinating, I thought the rapture was for sure going to happen. Remember, I was at the doctor with my fiance, and the doctor left the room, and I was like, oh, we should Oh, it might have been a joke too, because I was just like, oh, let's go run out and hide. They'll think the rapture happened. And then, I don't know if she's, no, I think she's like, well, we probably have to leave our clothes behind. I was like, okay. No, so that would be interesting. Yep, if you're going to pretend to do the rapture, you got to get naked and drop your clothes and then run away. So, don't do that. Hopefully I'm done running naked in the community due to mental illness. So, kind of learned my lesson there. Yeah. But also the same is not true. So let's say you do have a historical spiritual document that kind of gets it right in some areas. Yeah, that also doesn't mean that that's the reason why it was right either. So I'm fascinated if you can get there by guessing, and then also yeah, how you'd prove that your guess was not much more than coincidence. But yeah, so that, I mean, that's probably what I should have started the video with. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about, especially that. Okay, no, I can go on a little bit longer. Sometimes I just forget what topics I was going to talk about. But the speed of light is very interesting. Like you should always, even if you're like don't know much about science, that's what I kind of like the flat Earth, type atmosphere, just because like. I mean, you have people that probably wouldn't open a science book, but they're like really into flat Earth or something, and then they actually might open a science book for the opposite reasons. But they're going to investigate something for the opposite reasons, and even that's better than you not investigating at all. Like if you're not a flat earther and don't care about science, like that's probably. Like, not as exciting as, it's like you're not doing anything to help either, you know what I mean? So, but even if you're like a flat earther going out there and looking at, the moon and stuff, I mean, I think that's fascinating because, like, you're actually doing, like, you're visually doing more analytical science in your head, even though when it comes time to, like, spew whatever you're thinking, it's probably irrational. But yeah, the concept still is there. It's like you're still taking a topic. That's why it's just like, yeah. It's like if you're looking at opposites. I always looked at opposites. It's like, well, what's the opposite of good? It's like evil. It's like, well, I mean, I'm a Gemini, and maybe that's one of the aspects. I guess I put enough stock into astrology as someone tells me that I'm Gemini, and then so I go look at what the hell that means, and so that's kind of my perspective. I don't know how you get out of that element, you know what I mean? When like someone says, hey, you're Gemini, okay, so this is, I'm able to see opposites. This is my superpower. It's literally like yeah, it's literally like a Jumanji. Like you're just in, it's just like, these are my superpowers, I guess. Somebody told me, so here we go. But yeah, the opposite, that's stupid. It's like the opposite of an apple is an orange. Like, no, the opposite of an apple is, I don't know, something so irrationally complex or simple, I don't know, but it's not a food. Like, why is the opposite of a food a food? Like, why, so it's obviously you're talking about the same topic. So even if so opposites are very interesting in the fact that we think things are opposite. Like, the opposite side of a coin, it's like, well, you're still talking about a coin. So the opposites, so it's very relative. When you're talking about concepts of opposites, because you're still talking about, when it comes to the heads and tails on a coin, you're still talking about a freaking coin. So I kind of use that. I think it's important. Anyway, so the speed of light. So one of the things that I was intrigued with was they can only measure it twice. Like it bounces and then it bounces back. I'm very intrigued by light because when I was on the middle fork, most of my episodes, they usually light involved. Light's very interesting. My mom makes stained glass lamps. That's going to be a when she passes on, and if I outlive her or whatever, it'll be a very nice thing to have. Is some of her stained glass lamps, and she makes glass ornaments and stained glass things to hang. Just light coming through different colored glass. It's even this lamp right over here, my grandma passed. This is one of her lights, and yeah, it's so interesting. It's like, woof. It's kind of it's very it's very nice. And there might be some meta, very interesting things with light. I mean, yeah, light is what makes the universe go round. But yeah, I guess I won't get into that. Yeah, I made an obvious error in one of my assumptions, and so yeah, I threw out a comment on YouTube, but then it was wrong, so it's always good to potentially do some research and get to the right answers. But then, if there are questions that are unknown, then that's fair territory. Yeah, it's like I mean, we're all pretty intelligent people, and we already have resources to information, so it's like it should be pretty easy to leave off where Einstein left off. I mean, kind of as a joke, but I was fascinated with one of Einstein's equations for the speed of light and time travel. Like, this is literally a physics concept that works in our universe, that if you travel faster, the time that you're going to be doing whatever you did, you'll do it at a slower rate than if you're going slow on a slow planet. You will start, you'll age. So, I mean, if you want to, and time in both those places will be the same. It'll feel, 1 second there will feel like 1 second here. But if you wanted to visit, since we can only live for like 100 years, let's say, if you wanted to visit our Earth in the future, you would go on a ship at the speed of light for a long time and then come back and, hey, it is like, 2,100. Like, that would be pretty exciting. I mean, that's probably as far as you could get. But you could see what's going on in the future. I mean, that doesn't exist right now, but that might be more plausible than cryogenically freezing you and bringing you back to life if you wanted to see what's going to happen 50 years from now, knowing that you're not going to live 50 years from now, let's say, or 100, would make more sense. So the equation for figuring out the time difference is all related to how fast and close you are to the speed of light. So if you travel in a ship close to the speed of light, then this will have a bigger effect. If you travel at 99% the speed of light, alright, if you travel 99% the speed of light for 5 years, or no, for a year, you come back to Earth 5 years past. If you travel 99.9% the speed of light for a year, come back to Earth 50 years. So it's a log scale, 50 years past. So basically, the speed of light is the speed limit for the universe. And that was interesting. You can just Google that. But just that concept was so fascinating to me. So, I mean, there's a lot of scientific concepts out there, but, you know, especially that one, that can hold more juice. It's like that can have more meaning, actually, than just being a number. I mean, especially how our numbers work, it's just like 2 comes after 1, but you get to the speed of light and nothing's faster. Like, that's the speed limit. That's, from my perspective, that is very fascinating. And it's interesting how time, the 99.99% of the speed of light, you travel that for a year, you know, 500 years. So that's kind of the log scale of how that, how Einstein's equation works. And I mean, that's just a physical property of science. Obviously, no human's going to be traveling the speed of light anytime soon. But particles travel the speed of light all the time. So time relative to that particle is for sure going to fit that equation. Like, because if you can put a clock on that particle that's traveling the speed of light, that goes back, you know, bounces one way in the universe and then bounces back, let's say, now you're talking, you know, a time change. So it was just interesting that yeah, it got me interested. I mean, just from like the analogy, it seemed like everything in the universe is actually just a clock, because everything is relative to everything else. So that time dilation still works, but if you're not towards the speed of light, it's almost, you know, it's hardly anything at all. But it can still just be a slight change. And this is something I do potentially want to make a video on. Don't quote me, but I think the speed of light was like 300,000 meters a second. So 300,000 meters a second. So 1,000 times slower was like 3,000 meters a second. And that was, I think, just the speed of, like the speed of the, oh, let me not use the numbers, but I was very intrigued to see that even the speed of our solar system, and maybe I was thinking the Milky Way, so like the speed of the Milky Way in our galaxy compared to the speed of our solar system was even just, you know, 1,000 times, and then like 30. It was just a percentage smaller than speed of light. So I mean 1,000 times is a big jump, and then our solar system being another, you know, like 30 times slower, and then our Earth being like another 10 times slower. But it got to the point that, you know, even my folks went on a trip. Let's say they're traveling around the globe at a different, you know, speed. You still have time dilation. So I was interested in that aspect, that time dilation as a concept still always exists. So if you are in a jet, it's still you're pushing against the speed of light at a slight fraction, but that fraction is still quantitatable. So I thought that was very fascinating. I mean, totally insignificant when it comes to, you know, clocks changing, but maybe enough. But it's still a fraction that is very interesting, that you can still put it into the time dilation equation and see that potentially the person pushing against that speed, that travels slower or faster, you know, their times are going to be different. And I just thought that was interesting. Alright, I think I'm going to leave it there. And, yeah. Very scattered this evening. But talking about concepts I really don't talk a lot about, so I don't want to get anything wrong, or or just say something, I don't know, that I just don't believe in. But experiential things like the dreams, I think I want to talk more about that, because that's something that is personal. It's an experience. Other people could have that same experience. I don't know if it's going to break ground in physics and metaphysics, but I do find it fascinating. Alright, thanks. Alright, I can't end it there, because the whole concept of talking about the speed of light was that the speed of light is a constant. And then so the fact that the speed of light is 300,000 meters per second, well, the speed of light should be 1. Like, that should be and maybe it is. Maybe I'll have to look that up if scientifically the speed of light is, I mean, I think it's 1 AU, or 1 astronomical unit. Is that what they use? Maybe that's distance, though. But the speed, like literally the speed of light, if it's a constant, if that is the speed limit of our universe, that should be 1. And then, so, because that's fascinating. Because, this brings up a metaphysical concept. Because the faster you get to the speed of light, the more that your time is basically infinite compared to everyone else's time that's traveling slower. So if you're traveling slower, you're kind of, if you're traveling so close to the speed of light and then come back to Earth, an infinite amount of time could have passed on Earth. If you actually get to the speed of light, so the fact that particles can travel the speed of light means that I just thought that was fascinating, because then they could be so if particles traveling the speed of can travel the speed of light, and if they came back to Earth, an infinite time could pass on Earth. So the speed of light, that light particle could be experiencing eternity. And then that concept potentially gets the hairs on the back of my neck to stand. Because if you do have this time dilation equation, where if you get to the speed of light, more time is going to pass on Earth if you ever get back to Earth and slow down and stop. Things that are traveling the speed of light are potentially, I was thinking traveling instantaneously, but also traveling just eternally, like for, it seems interesting. So I would like to talk to, I'll just talk to my brother about that concept. I think he would be fascinated with that idea. Just using the time dilation equation as it's kind of written, and things that are traveling the speed of light, but yeah, and I don't think light can travel slower than the speed of light. I mean, I think it's ingrained into it. But I was fascinated with, like, if that's a constant, then that should be 1, and everything else should be a fraction of 1. And how that kind of relates to infinity. If, like, you do have this speed of light being a kind of instantaneous and eternal element, like, kind of timeless. I mean, Einstein's dilation equation potentially would say that anything approaching the speed of light kind of does become isolated, timeless. So I'll have to relook at that one, or just kind of ask some more people about it. But I did find that was kind of the take-home message, kind of relating one and infinity. That was the other way of, like, I was thinking, kind of to relating those concepts, and but also, if the speed of light is the speed limit, then that should be one, and everything else should be. Because when it came down, I had this conversation with my uncle about 5-10 years ago, and I said, well, there's nothing in the universe that's actually, like a unit length, or like a unit, like all our basis of measurements are just completely arbitrary. When it comes to the meter, the foot, the inch, the centimeter, all that is just made up. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just and then the kilogram, that's just made up. It's made up, but also nothing is constant length. Like, if you take every little piece of, I know historically you'd take grains of, some sort of grain, and then line them up, and then that would be your length, or even your weight for some of these things, just because they were fairly consistent. But there's hardly anything that's consistent. That's why length is measured by wavelengths of particles in a vacuum at a certain temperature. Everything's kind of the same, and then that's what you're measuring. But yeah, that's why I was just, so if something is a constant, like the speed of light, I thought that was just very interesting, because then you can have a, I don't know, it seems more tangible. So that would be one that I could recognize as being a constant. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna leave it at that. Peace.